now sometimes this gets hard to visualize when we have something like 90, right? So what does it mean when the angle is exactly 90? People get confused. The best way to understand that is just to think about what happens as we get close to 90. I'm not draw the circle thing every time just because it's hard to do. So let's pick a triangle that is going to go, well, maybe circle is actually a good idea. Here we go, boom. All right. So let's pick a triangle that is close to 90 or something like this, okay? I don't know. Let's say this is, what does that look like? 70, okay? So now here, this is the cosine of the angle, and this side is the sine of the angle, right? When this is the unit circle. And now, what's going to happen to this triangle as I make this even bigger? Okay, so let's make it even bigger. Let's try that again. Boom. Now I'm going to make this like, I don't know, try to make it like 80 or, as steep as possible. So now the triangle looks like this. Okay, so I'm not going to, that's a right angle. So now let's say the angle is, I don't know, I'm just making it up, at 85, okay? So now the cosine is this, and the sine is that. All right. So what does cosine of 90 mean? Well, what could it mean, right? What's going to happen to this side when this triangle goes straight? It's going to disappear. You could just try it. You see how it's just getting smaller and smaller as we move up to angle 90, right? The x part gets smaller and smaller, which means there's only one logical thing to call this, which is 0. The x part of this direction is 0, so to say. So sine, what is sine of 90 going to be? Sine of 90, this is the sine part of the triangle. Well, what does it look like is happening to that side as we get bigger and bigger and closer to 90? Well, it's getting more and more, it's getting longer and longer to the point where when we make the triangle at 90, there's only going to be that y side left. And how long is that y side? It is 1. See, this is why the unit circle comes in handy. What is cosine of 0? Okay, so once again, you just have to sort of think, if this is your triangle, and here we have a circle, and what is going to happen? Remember, this is 1. What is going to happen when this goes and gets smaller and smaller and smaller? What's going to happen to this side, okay? Or should we think about what happens to this side first? It's easier. So that side is sine. So what is sine of 0 going to be? Well, if you keep making that triangle smaller and smaller, this is going to get flatter and flatter, right? And this is always 1. So what's going to happen to this side? What's going to happen to the sine side? Well, it's disappearing, right? To the point where when we actually have an angle of 0, we're not going to even have a triangle. We're just going to have this line that goes here. So what happened to this? Well, it became 0. And what happened to this part? Well, it keeps getting longer and longer until it actually reaches the end of the circle in the flat line length 1. Okay? So we have as well, what happens when we get over here to 180? And it's exactly the same idea. You just look at the triangle as it approaches 180, and you think, what is going to happen to the x side of this triangle, right? So that would be this here. What's going to happen as this angle here approaches 180? I'm just going to draw it on the side. This is going to become increasingly flat again, right? And so this side here, the cosine side, the x side, is going to end up approaching this flat line of length 1, okay? Now the only thing you have to realize is that since this is the negative side, it's going to be -1. So cosine, of course, of 180 is -1, right? Because we're on the negative x-axis. As discussed before, this fits seamlessly with everything we've said before. What's going to happen to the sine at 180? Well, I think you see it. If you understood the previous examples, that's just going to disappear and become 0. And so then there's also 270. Same exact idea. What happens as our triangle approaches over here to 270? Well, no big mystery. Looks a little weird maybe. This is the angle we're talking about, 270. What's going to happen to the x side? Well, it's just going to get smaller, right? This gets steeper, this gets smaller. So cosine of 270 is going to be 0 because this is getting smaller and smaller. See, I even thought about it. I don't memorize this stuff. I think about it every single time. Sine, that's the y side, is going to get longer and longer until finally it becomes this line here, which is 1, but of course it's -1 because it's the y-axis in the negative region, so that's -1. And then 360, I don't even have to go through because 360 is exactly the same thing as 0. This may seem a little bit confusing, but it's certainly better than memorizing cosine of 0 is 1 and sine of 0 is 0. And like, I don't even know how people memorize that. That's like memorizing binary code. You just have to imagine very quickly what is happening to x, right? And what is happening to y when we talk about sine. If you understand that, all of this becomes really, really easy. You just have to have a little courage because, of course, in school, mostly they're telling you to just memorize all this stuff. I really don't understand how you memorize, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0. Very confusing to me. Take a minute, try to understand this, and everything will work out just fine.